I never thought I'd be in this situation. You hear stories about betrayal, infidelity, and heartbreak, but it's like watching a movie until it becomes your life. My wife, Melissa, and I had been married for 7 years. We had a decent life. Nothing flashy but comfortable, a small house in the suburbs, a dog named Max, and a steady routine. We built a life together, or at least I thought we had. Lately, though, something felt off. Little things started to shift. Melissa would come home late from work, and instead of the usual chatter about her day, she'd be short with me. I brushed it off as stress from her job. She was a real estate agent, and things could get hectic, especially with the market buzzing. But there was an underlying tension I couldn't ignore. Then there was the phone. I don't want to sound paranoid, but she began to guard it like it was the crown jewels. She'd leave the room to take calls, and when I asked who was on the other line, she'd brush me off with, "Just a client." I wasn't buying it. The vibe was off, like a song played out of tune. I tried to shake the feeling of nagging curiosity away, but it clung to me like a shadow. The day it all came crashing down was a Saturday. I had planned to surprise Melissa with a lovely dinner. I left the house early to get some groceries and thought I'd pick up her favorite wine to set the mood. As I was driving back home, I noticed a familiar car parked near our house. It was Tom, my lawyer. I thought it was odd for him to be in the neighborhood, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was visiting a client or something. When I entered the house, I sensed something was off right away. The lights were dimmed, the radio was turned down low, and the air was thick with tension. I called out for Melissa but got no response. I made my way to the living room and froze. There was Tom, lounging on our couch, and Melissa was sitting beside him, her head thrown back in laughter. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there dumbfounded, my groceries forgotten at my feet. Their laughter echoed in my ears, mocking me. I felt my heart race and my fists clenched involuntarily. How could this be happening? I wanted to turn and walk away, but I was rooted to the spot, watching my wife's betrayal unfold in real time. I cleared my throat, trying to muster some semblance of control. "What the hell is going on here?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Both of them jumped, and for a moment there was silence. Melissa's eyes widened and the laughter vanished. Tom, ever the smooth talker, quickly composed himself and stood up, trying to play it off. "Hey man, I interrupted him, my anger boiling over. "Just what? Just hanging out with my wife in our house." I looked at Melissa, searching her face for an explanation. "Is this how you repay me for everything?" She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out at first. After a few moments, she finally stammered, "It's not what it looks like, I swear. Tom was just helping me with some paperwork." "Paperwork?" I laughed, though it felt more like a bark. "Is that what they call it now?" Her demeanor shifted from surprise to something more defensive. "You're being ridiculous. I can have friends over, can't I?" "Friends?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Is that what you call him? Because from where I'm standing it looks like something else entirely." The atmosphere crackled with tension, and for a moment everything felt surreal. My mind was racing with emotions: betrayal, anger, humiliation. I turned away, clenching my fists, desperately trying to process what I was feeling. How could she do this to me? I never thought I'd be the guy who'd confront his wife about an affair. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. The reality of her betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, but I had to keep my composure. There was no way I would show weakness now. I had to hold it together. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. This wasn't going to be the end of me. I was going to fight back. I didn't know how yet, but I would make sure she wouldn't get away with this. That confrontation felt like the first chapter of a horror novel. After I stormed out of the living room, I heard Melissa scream my name, but I didn't stop. I needed to think, to breathe. I stepped outside, feeling the cool air hit my face. I walked around our backyard, the grass crunching under my shoes, trying to process what just happened. I knew I had to face the facts. My wife was cheating on me with my lawyer, of all people. Tom and I had shared drinks to celebrate my recent promotion just a few weeks prior. He had been the guy I trusted to keep my best interests at heart. Seeing him cozying up with Melissa felt like a betrayal on two fronts. I paced back and forth, my mind racing. I felt sick, like I'd swallowed a rock. The anger inside me simmered, bubbling up like lava. anger that my life was unraveling in front of me. I thought about the life we'd built together, the family we had discussed. All of that felt like a cruel joke now. After some time, I went back into the house, my heart pounding. Melissa was waiting for me. Her face was a mix of guilt and defiance, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I wanted to ask so many questions to dig into her psyche, but I knew it would only lead to more lies. Instead, I cut straight to the chase. "Who else knows about this?" I demanded, my voice steady. "What do you mean?" she replied, crossing her arms defensively. "I mean, have you told anyone else, friends, family, your coworkers?" "I haven't told anyone," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "You're being ridiculous. This is all a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? I almost laughed at her blatant denial. "You were just having fun with Tom in our living room. That's pretty clear-cut to me." She took a step toward me, her expression softening. "You don't understand. Tom is just a friend. He's been helping me with work." "Enough," I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "If he's just a friend, why hide it? Why not introduce him to me, or at least communicate instead of sneaking around?" Her eyes darted around, and I could see her mentally scrambling for something, anything, to say that would absolve her of responsibility. "I was going to tell you," she finally said, her voice a bit shaky. "I wanted to wait until it was the right time." "Right time?" I echoed incredulously. "What could possibly be the right time to confess you're cheating on your husband?" I was done listening to her excuses. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying through her teeth. I walked away from her, needing to put some distance between us. As I paced around the house, the reality of the situation sank in deeper. I felt a flood of emotions, a torrent that churned in the pit of my stomach. I replayed every moment in my mind: the late nights, the sudden changes in her behavior, the guarded phone. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Although I had once believed in the vows we exchanged, I now realized they had meant nothing to her. I was determined to fight back. The idea of divorce began to form in my mind. I'd seen couples go through it, and I knew that in many cases it wasn't just about emotional loss. It often became a battle for assets, custody, and dignity. I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything. I was going to hire a lawyer, better than Tom, and make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. That evening, after several hours of silence between us, I made my way to the computer. I needed to gather information. I started looking up divorce attorneys in our area. I wanted someone tough, someone who would fight for me. As I scrolled through the listings, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. It was time to take control. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could dictate what happened next. I was going to ensure Tom and Melissa wouldn't get the last laugh. I couldn't let their betrayal define me. After a long night of restless thoughts, I finally fell asleep, my mind racing with potential strategies and plans. I was resolved to show them both that I wasn't going down without a fight. I had been wronged, and now it was time for payback. The next few days felt like a strange limbo. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. I was plotting my revenge like a chess player, thinking 3 moves ahead. I didn't have to think long about which attorney to call. I needed someone experienced and ruthless. I decided on Laura, a lawyer who had built a reputation for being tough and unyielding in the courtroom. I made the call, and after a brief conversation, I set up an appointment for that Friday evening. As I hung up, a sense of relief washed over me. This was the first step toward reclaiming my life. I felt empowered, even if the circumstances were anything but ideal. I returned home that evening, determined to maintain my composure. Melissa was there, and the atmosphere in the house was thick with unspoken tension. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Are we going to talk about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Talk about what?" I replied, keeping my tone even. "How you betrayed me, or how you're trying to cover it with lies." She looked hurt, and for a moment I almost felt guilty. But then I remembered Tom lounging on the couch, the two of them laughing like old friends. I pushed the guilt aside. "I think it's best if we focus on what happens next," I said, trying to sound as calm as possible. "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "I mean, I've decided to hire a lawyer. We need to talk about the divorce." Her face paled, and I could see the realization settle in. "You're really going to do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, I am," I replied. "You've made your choices and now I'm making mine." The look on her face was one of disbelief. "You don't have to do this. We can work it out. I'll go to counseling or whatever it takes." I interrupted her again, this time more forcefully. "No, Melissa, you had your chance to work it out when you decided to sleep with my lawyer. You made your choice when you prioritized your pleasure over our marriage. I'm not interested in saving something that you clearly don't care about." The silence that followed felt heavy. I could see her searching for the right words, but nothing came. The fight had gone out of her. I felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing I had finally taken the upper hand. Friday evening came, and I met with Laura in her office. She was everything I had hoped for: sharp, professional, and unyielding. I laid out everything I knew about the affair, detailing the timeline and the little pieces of evidence I had gathered. I felt like I was laying out a strategy for war. Laura listened intently, taking notes and nodding occasionally. "Your case is straightforward," she said, her tone matter of fact. "We'll pursue an equitable distribution of your assets. Given the circumstances, we can seek to ensure that Melissa gets as little as possible." I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. I had spent years working hard, and the thought of her walking away with half of what I had built made me sick to my stomach. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my dignity. After our meeting, I felt lighter, as if I had finally unburdened myself. I returned home with a newfound sense of purpose. I was no longer the victim. I was the one taking control of my life. Over the next few weeks, our interactions remained tense but strictly businesslike. I focused on gathering all relevant documents, financial records, and anything that could support my case. I was meticulous, determined to get every detail right. I even went through our joint bank statements, noting down any suspicious transactions that could further support my claims against her. Melissa tried to be cordial, but each time I saw her, the memories of her deception flooded back. I was not ready to engage in friendly conversations or reminisce about happier times. My focus was on the impending divorce, and I was prepared to fight tooth and nail. One evening, as I was going through some old emails, something caught my eye: a series of messages between Melissa and Tom. My heart raced as I opened them, my stomach tightening with each word. They were filled with flirtation and inside jokes, culminating in plans for late-night meetings that made my blood boil. I printed them out, feeling a sense of triumph. This could be the key evidence I needed in court. I knew that if I presented this to Laura, it would bolster my case even more. She had broken my trust, and now I would make sure she felt the consequences. As I tucked the printed emails away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, satisfaction, and a tinge of sadness. I had loved her once, and now I was forced to consider her a stranger, but I couldn't dwell on those feelings. I had a plan to execute, and I was determined to see it through. The stage was set. All I needed to do was wait for the right moment to strike. I was ready to turn the page on this chapter of betrayal and emerge stronger on the other side. As the weeks dragged on, the tension in the house began to feel suffocating. Melissa and I navigated our daily lives like two ships passing in the night, both of us aware of the impending storm but too stubborn to engage in meaningful conversations. Every time I glanced at her, I was reminded of the betrayal, and it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I continued to work closely with Laura, gathering more evidence and preparing for the inevitable court proceedings. We finalized our strategy, and she assured me that the emails I had found would significantly strengthen my case. Each time I left her office, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was moving forward, and there was no turning back now. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table going through paperwork, Melissa walked in. She wore that familiar look, the one that said she wanted to talk, but I wasn't in the mood to hear any more of her excuses. "Can we at least try to talk about this?" she asked, her voice slightly pleading. I looked up from my papers, feeling the anger bubble just beneath the surface. "Talk about what? How you betrayed me, how you threw away everything we built together." "I'm trying to apologize," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "You need to give me a chance to explain. I made a mistake." "A mistake? Is that what you call it?" I snapped back. "You made a choice, Melissa, a conscious choice to cheat on me with my lawyer. I've already made my decision. There's no going back from this." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of compassion. But it quickly faded as I remembered her laughter with Tom, their betrayal playing on repeat in my mind. "You don't understand how painful this is for me," she said, her voice trembling. "No, I don't think I do," I replied. "You had every chance to communicate with me to fix things before it came to this. Instead, you chose to be with someone else. You don't get to act like a victim now." With that, I stood up and walked away, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her cheeks. I felt a twinge of guilt but quickly dismissed it. I had already given her too many chances. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Each morning, I woke up with the same resolve, but there was still an unsettling feeling in my gut. I was gearing up for the war ahead, mentally preparing myself for the courtroom battle. The day of the divorce hearing finally arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I wore my best suit, wanting to convey confidence and seriousness. As I arrived at the courthouse, my heart raced. I was ready to face Melissa and Tom, to confront them both with the truth. When I stepped into the courtroom, the air felt charged. It was a small room, and I could see Melissa sitting at the plaintiff's table, her eyes cast down. Tom was beside her, whispering something in her ear. Seeing them together again made my blood boil, but I pushed it down. Laura joined me, and we exchanged a brief nod before taking our seats. I could feel the tension rising as the judge entered and called the court to order. My heart pounded in my chest as we prepared to present our case. Laura began by outlining the circumstances of our marriage, focusing on the timeline and the evidence of Melissa's infidelity. I sat there, feeling a mix of vindication and anger as I listened to her lay out the facts. Then came the turning point. Laura presented the emails I had found. "Your Honor," Laura said, her voice steady and clear, "these emails provide irrefutable evidence of the emotional affair that took place between my client's wife and her attorney. This was not just a fleeting moment. It was an ongoing relationship that undermined the foundation of their marriage." As the judge read through the emails, I watched Melissa's face drain of color. Her expression shifted from feigned innocence to sheer panic. I could see her trembling as reality hit her like a freight train. Tom fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could sense that he was regretting his role in this mess. I felt a wave of satisfaction as I saw the tables turning. This was my moment of revenge, the culmination of my plans. After Laura presented the evidence, it was Melissa's turn to speak. She stood up, attempting to defend her actions, but her arguments fell flat. The more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for things to get so out of control." The judge listened patiently, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. I felt a rush of validation as I realized that my preparation was paying off. Laura calmly countered each of Melissa's claims, and I could see the cracks forming in her facade. Finally, after what felt like hours, it was over. The judge deliberated briefly before announcing his decision. "Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the marriage has irretrievably broken down due to the defendant's actions. I am awarding the plaintiff full custody of their joint assets." The gavel slammed down, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had won. I didn't know what my life would look like moving forward, but in that moment I felt free. Melissa's face crumpled as she processed the ruling, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. I had fought back, and I had come out on top. As I left the courtroom, the weight I had been carrying for weeks began to lift. I was ready to start anew, to reclaim my life and my happiness. The aftermath of the divorce hearing felt surreal. I stepped out of the courthouse, a mix of emotions swirling inside me, relief, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. I had faced my worst fears and emerged victorious. I didn't have to look back anymore. I was free from the burden of betrayal. As I walked to my car, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I had taken control of my life again, and for the first time in weeks I felt a sense of hope. I could rebuild. I could reclaim my happiness. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. After the hearing, I couldn't wait to call Laura and discuss the next steps. We had talked about a division of assets, but now it felt like a formality. I was ready to move on, but I still had a few loose ends to tie up. The divorce settlement wasn't finalized yet, and I wanted to ensure that I came out of this with as little baggage as possible. When I got home, I settled onto the couch, taking a moment to let everything sink in. The house felt eerily quiet without the constant tension that had filled it for months. I picked up my phone and dialed Laura's number. "Congratulations on the ruling," she said after a few rings. "You handled yourself well in there." "Thanks, Laura. I couldn't have done it without your help. What do we need to do next?" She explained the details of the settlement process, and we discussed how to maximize my share of the assets. I was determined to ensure that Melissa wouldn't walk away with anything she didn't deserve. This was my time to take back what was rightfully mine. As I hung up, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I couldn't believe how strong I felt. I had fought back and won, and I was ready to take charge of my life. Moving forward, the following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork and meetings with Laura. I learned more about the legal system than I ever anticipated, and it felt empowering. I was not just a victim of circumstance, I was an active participant in my future. Melissa tried to reach out several times, sending texts that ranged from desperate apologies to attempts at guilt-tripping me. "We can still make this work." One message read, "I made a mistake, but I love you." I didn't respond to any of them. I knew that engaging with her would only pull me back into the cycle of pain and manipulation. I had to stay focused on myself, on rebuilding the life I wanted without her. As the settlement negotiations moved forward, several days turned into weeks. I realized that I was beginning to feel like myself again. I started exercising more, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage, and even picked up a few hobbies I had set aside. I began to rediscover the man I used to be before all the drama consumed me. However, there were still moments when I felt the sting of betrayal. I'd catch myself replaying memories of our life together, and though I tried to push them aside, they lingered like shadows. I knew I had to confront these feelings head-on and not let them define me. One late afternoon, as I was cleaning out some old boxes in the garage, I came across our wedding album. I hesitated, feeling a wave of nostalgia wash over me. I opened it, flipping through the pages filled with smiles, laughter, and vows I once believed in. But then I reminded myself of the reality, the deceit, the betrayal, the lies. Those moments were overshadowed by the painful truth of what Melissa had done. I took a deep breath and decided right then and there that I wouldn't allow those memories to hold power over me anymore. With a newfound determination, I gathered the album and other reminders of our life together and placed them in a box. I was going to let go of the past completely. It was time to embrace the future, whatever it held. As the final settlement day approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. I was ready to sign the papers and finally close this chapter of my life. Laura had done a commendable job, and I felt confident that I would leave the negotiations with what I deserved. On the day of the settlement, I walked into Laura's office, ready to finalize everything. She smiled at me, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. "This is it," she said. "You've come a long way." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "I couldn't have done it without you." She laid out the terms, and I reviewed everything carefully. I felt a rush of satisfaction as I signed the documents. This was it. I was officially free. After years of feeling trapped, I had taken back control of my life. As I left the office, I felt light, unburdened. I had closed the door on a painful chapter, and now it was time to look forward. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to embrace it head-on. I was determined to learn from the past but not be defined by it. With every step I took away from that office, I felt the chains of my former life breaking. I was ready to reclaim my happiness and forge a new path, one that was mine and mine alone. The days following the settlement felt like a rebirth. I was no longer tethered to the pain and betrayal that had consumed my life. I had reclaimed my freedom, and with it came a newfound sense of self. The first thing I did was take a week off work to clear my head and rediscover what it meant to live for myself. I decided to take a trip, somewhere far away, where I could breathe and reflect on everything that had happened. I booked a cabin in the woods, surrounded by nature, a place where I could find peace and solitude. As I drove to my destination, I let the weight of the past wash away with every mile. Arriving at the cabin, I felt a sense of tranquility envelop me. The air was crisp, and the silence was comforting. I spent the first day exploring the area, hiking through lush trails and breathing in the fresh mountain air. Each step felt like a step away from my old life, and I relished it. That night I sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. It was beautiful, a reminder of how vast the world was and how many possibilities lay ahead. I took out my journal, something I hadn't used in years, and began to write. I poured my thoughts onto the pages, reflections on my marriage, the betrayal, but also on my growth and the lessons learned. I wrote about the importance of self-worth and the dangers of complacency in relationships. I realized how easy it had been to ignore the red flags, to silence my instincts in favor of maintaining peace. But I had learned that if I wanted to be truly happy, I needed to prioritize myself first. As the week progressed, I began to feel a sense of hope I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was no longer anchored by the weight of Melissa's betrayal. Instead, I was free to pursue my interests, dreams, and passions without compromise. I hiked during the day, cooked meals for myself, and even experimented with fishing, a hobby I had always wanted to try but never pursued. By the end of the week, I felt rejuvenated and rediscovered my love for life. I made a promise to myself. I would never settle for less than I deserved again. I would build a life that reflected my true self, one filled with genuine connections and authenticity. Returning home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I embarked on a new routine, prioritizing my health and well-being. I started exercising regularly, eating better, and reconnecting with old friends. I even joined a local community group where I met new people who shared my interests. One evening, during a group outing, I met Sarah. She was vibrant and full of life, someone who radiated positivity. We hit it off immediately, sharing stories, laughter, and a mutual desire to explore life. I took my time getting to know her, embracing the idea of friendship first. I was cautious, but this time I was open to the possibilities. As we spent more time together, I began to realize how different this dynamic was from my past relationship. Sarah was authentic, communicative, and supportive. She challenged me to grow while also being a source of comfort. It felt refreshing, and I found myself genuinely excited about where things could lead. Months passed, and my life continued to transform. I moved forward with purpose. I invested time in my career, focusing on professional development and seeking new opportunities. I found fulfillment in my work, which had been overshadowed during my marriage. I also made a conscious effort to nurture my relationships with family and friends, reconnecting with those I had lost touch with. It was during one of our outings that I realized just how far I had come. I stood with Sarah at a lookout point, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I turned to her, a sense of gratitude washing over me. "You know," I said, "I never thought I could move on from the past, but here I am, and it feels incredible." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "You deserve this happiness, we all do." In that moment, I understood the importance of resilience. Life would throw challenges my way, but I had the strength to face them. I had emerged from the ashes of betrayal, stronger than ever, ready to embrace the future. As I reflected on my journey, I thought about how much I had learned. I had grown from the experience, and although it had been painful, it had shaped me into the person I was becoming. I was grateful for the lessons and ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. I knew that love had its risks, but I was willing to take that leap again. I had rebuilt my life, rediscovered my passions, and learned to love myself first. This time, I would trust my instincts and make choices that honored my worth. Ultimately, that was the greatest revenge of all, not the bitterness of retaliation, but the sweetness of rediscovery and growth. I walked forward, ready to embrace life and love on my terms. The future was bright, and I was excited to see where it would take me.